Good morning, folks. Being a successful D&D game master requires empathy. What on earth does that mean? Well, if you're not aware, D&D and other tabletop role-playing games are storytelling games you play with your friends, or even strangers, that involve rolling dice and chance when an outcome is uncertain. That's the one-sentence elevator pitch of tabletop role-playing games. D&D is one such game in that genre. Before we get into the meat of today's topic, I'm going to take a page out of Zach the Bold's book and start calling tabletop role-playing games D&D-likes. It keeps the word D&D in the titles for search engine optimization while instantly explaining the concept to people who are unfamiliar with tabletop role-playing games. So just know that from now on, I'm going to be calling tabletop role-playing games D&D-likes. So, being a successful D&D-like game master requires empathy. What do I mean by that? Well, game masters, as the referees for the game, need to run good guys, bad guys, and neutral guys alike. In other words, the most important concept of GMing is in taking on the role of many perspectives. I've played in many games where every NPC, despite being very different in-game, seem very similar when played by the specific game master that's running the game. This is because the GM has one particular perspective. In fact, the nature of acting itself is the prospect of pretending to be someone who you are not. In other words, you take on not only a different persona, but that persona necessarily has to have a different perspective from you. Putting your soul into a role means playing as someone who doesn't think like you, or at least they don't think like you in every way. So the conclusion here is that in order to accurately portray that role, you need to take on a new perspective. Now, for the important question, how do we gain new perspectives? Well, this can be done through the same means that any occupation gets to know their audience, by learning about them. For example, I'm a game developer, and I've made games where the audience is primarily kids. Clearly, I am no longer a kid, but I had to make a game for kids. So how do we do that? We learn about how kids think. We learn what they want, what they might not even realize that they want, and most importantly, their perspective. Okay, so big surprise. In order to make something for someone, we need to know information about them. But what does this have to do with being a game master? Well, everything. Game masters take on not only one role, but many. You are playing as numerous characters, the good guys, the bad guys, the neutral guys. Sometimes, depending on the campaign, individual game masters can play over 100 characters. So this means that game masters need to be able to take on the perspective of wildly different characters who behave in wildly different ways. If your working townsman character and your big bad evil guy give off the same impression, then the player's first reaction would either be that they're taken out of the experience, or they would start to speculate why two massively different characters behave so similarly. So as the final question, you may be wondering, why did I decide to use the word empathy instead of perspective? Empathy is the input. Perspective is the output. By taking the time to understand how people feel and what they think about a situation, you are more likely to gain a much-needed perspective that only that person can provide to you. But here's the key. There's no guarantee that you will get that perspective. I'm going to use an example from The Legend of Korra, which contains spoilers for Season 4. So here's a timestamp to skip that spoiler. In The Legend of Korra, the final challenge that Korra faces is in deciding what to do with Kuvira, the Great Uniter. Kuvira explained her vision as to what she ultimately wanted to do and explained that her final goal was noble, not evil as many seem to make it out to be. Additionally, numerous people discussed the positive attributes of Kuvira's plan, and the Korra from Season 1, who only knew how to fight through her problems, decided to show compassion, understanding, and empathy to Kuvira. The suffering that Korra faced was, although traumatic, the secret ingredient needed to understand what Kuvira was feeling. Now, while I would never recommend that anybody goes out of their way to cause danger to themselves in order to gain a new perspective, perspective can only be gained by either understanding or experiencing similar events to the person from whom the perspective originates. That's why I believe that being a great game master requires empathy. Without the variety of perspectives, the characters you could generate from your one mind is limited only to your personal life experiences. As a result, understanding the motivations, behaviors, moods, and backgrounds of not only your NPCs, but also your party's player characters becomes a near impossible challenge. So before your next game, take the chance to listen to someone and hear what they have to say. You might just gain a new perspective. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.